Priscilla Presley thought she knew every word Elvis ever wrote her. But one night, inside a faded envelope hidden at Graceland, she uncovered a secret love letter meant for someone else. What Elvis confessed on that page would shake her trust and alter the way fans remember their love forever. October 1976. Graceland stood quiet under a silver Memphis sky. The leaves had begun to turn, and the faint smell of autumn crept through the iron gates. For years, the house had been a stage for laughter, music, and the shuffle of visitors. But tonight, it seemed hollow, empty. Priscilla walked up the familiar steps with careful grace. She was no longer his wife, but she was still bound to the house, to the memories inside its walls. Elvis was alive, but their story was over. Still, the bond between them was something neither divorce nor distance could erase. The hall smelled faintly of cologne and leather. A scarf draped over the arm of a chair, left as if waiting for the man himself to return. In the corner, the grandfather clock ticked with slow, heavy beats. Each chime sounded louder in the silence, as though counting down to something unseen. She moved into the study, the room where Elvis once scribbled lyrics on scraps of paper, where he sometimes hid from the world. Dust lay on the piano keys. A half-finished song sheet rested on the desk, but it was the small drawer, jammed and stubborn, that caught her attention. Pulling it open with effort, she found envelopes, their edges yellowed with time. Most were familiar, fan letters, old invitations, fragments of business. But one envelope was different. Tucked between sheet music, it looked forgotten, even abandoned. The paper had softened with age, and the ink bled faintly through. Her heart quickened. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Elvis's looping scroll. The sight of it alone made her chest tighten. It was not addressed to her. No name, no date, only his hand, his mark. For a long moment, she stood still, frozen by the weight of the discovery. Should she open it? Was she trespassing into a past that was no longer hers? Or was this letter part of her story too, no matter who it was meant for? Her fingers trembled as she slid a nail under the seal. The flap lifted with a soft tear, a sound sharp in the quiet room. The letter slipped into her palm, delicate and fragile. She unfolded it slowly, the way you might handle something sacred or dangerous. Each line revealed itself like a whispered secret. It was not what she expected. It was not to her. The words carried the rhythm of love, but the name that should have been hers was missing. The sentences spoke of longing, of nights filled with absence, of a woman who was not Priscilla. The air seemed to thin around her. The lamp beside the chair buzzed faintly, filling the silence with its electric hum. She read on, her eyes moving faster, her heart pounding harder. Every line deepened the question echoing in her mind. Who was she? What was the story behind this hidden page, this silent confession? For the first time in years, Priscilla felt like an intruder in Elvis's world. She had known him as husband, father, friend. She had defended him, loved him, fought with him. But this was something else, something she had never seen. Her hands shook as she folded the page back into its envelope. The clock struck again, echoing down the hallway. She pressed the letter against her chest, unsure if it was anger, grief, or fear rising inside her. She whispered into the stillness, "Why didn't you tell me?" And the house, ancient and quiet, gave her no reply. But the truth was there, hidden in her hands. The truth that would force her to confront not only Elvis's choices, but her own. Because sometimes the greatest secrets are not buried by strangers. They are left behind by those we think we know best. What would you have done if you were her? Opened the letter or left it sealed? The envelope trembled in her hands, and she realized this was only the beginning. The letter shook in Priscilla's hands as though it carried a pulse of its own. She steadied herself against the desk, the polished wood cool under her fingers. She had braced for memories, maybe even grief, but she had not braced for this. Inside, the words were written in Elvis's unmistakable hand. Strong, hurried, emotional. But each sentence pierced her more deeply because they weren't meant for her. I think of you when the lights go down, when the crowd is gone and the silence is too heavy. I see your face in every song." The lines bled with intimacy. They described a woman whose absence left him restless, a woman who filled his mind when the stage emptied. There was no mention of Priscilla, no trace of their shared history. She closed her eyes and the memories came unbidden. Their wedding day, Lisa Marie's laughter, the long nights waiting for him to come home. All of it stood in contrast to this page, this confession. Who was this other woman? She whispered the question aloud, and the walls seemed to echo it back. Who was she? Her hands trembled again, but she forced herself to keep reading. Elvis wrote of drives down lonely highways, of hotel rooms where even the roar of a crowd couldn't reach him. He confessed to finding comfort in a voice that wasn't hers. The honesty of it was devastating. Not just the admission, but the tenderness, the kind of tenderness he once poured into letters for her. She pressed her lips together, fighting tears. The silence of the study pressed down harder, broken only by the faint buzz of a lamp and the distant tick of the clock. In that moment, she felt both betrayed and strangely close to him. This was the Elvis the world never saw, the man behind the stage lights, the man who bled onto paper in a way he never did in public. But was it betrayal, or was it simply truth? She thought of Lisa Marie, of the story the world believed, that Elvis and Priscilla had shared a fairy tale romance, broken only by time and fame. Would this letter change all that? Would it rewrite their legacy? Her breath caught as she read a final line. "I don't know if I'll ever find peace, but I know I can't forget you." Not her, someone else. The page shook in her hand, her vision blurred by tears. The myth of their love felt fragile now, like glass cracking under weight. If she exposed this letter, the shattering could be heard far beyond Graceland's gates. She lowered the page and looked around the room, the scarf on the chair, the piano waiting in silence. All of it was part of the life she once knew. And now, this letter sat in her palm like an intruder. Was this the proof of a secret affair? Or was it simply the lonely cry of a man who needed comfort in a world that demanded too much of him? She didn't know. She couldn't know. Her heart raced. She thought of the fans, millions who believed in the king's story of loyalty, love, and devotion. What would they say if they saw these words? Would they forgive him, or would they turn away? The stakes stretched far beyond her own heartbreak. This wasn't just about her. It was about his legacy, his daughter, his myth. She slipped the letter back into its envelope, but its weight did not lessen. It felt heavier now, as though carrying the burden of truth itself. She pressed it to her chest and whispered, "Why didn't you burn this, Elvis? Why did you leave it here for me to find?" The only answer was silence. The silence of a house that held too many memories, too many secrets. Priscilla sank into the chair by the desk. Her tears blurred the lamplight into a haze. The envelope lay in her lap, trembling with each beat of her heart. And for the first time, she wondered, had she ever truly known him? The thought lingered, sharp and heavy, as the night closed in around her. Because the truth wasn't just in the letter. The truth was in the questions it forced her to ask, and she was only beginning to realize how dangerous those questions could be. The study felt smaller now, as if the walls had moved in around her. Priscilla sat in silence, the letter still heavy in her lap. The envelope looked harmless, but it was not. It was a blade sharp enough to cut through years of memory and devotion. She thought of Lisa Marie, asleep in her room years earlier, clutching a stuffed bear Elvis had once brought home from a show. That little girl believed her parents' love was the kind sung about in lullabies. Could she ever know that her father's heart had wandered, even briefly? The thought was unbearable. Priscilla rose, pacing the room. Every corner of Graceland whispered Elvis's presence. The piano where he played gospel, the chair where he told stories, the hallway where his laughter once echoed. Each memory clashed violently with the words she had just read. "I can't forget you." The phrase repeated in her mind like a chorus she couldn't silence. If this letter reached the world, The damage could be irreversible. Reporters would devour it. Fans would question everything. The fairy tale image of Elvis and Priscilla, the king and his queen, would fracture. The myth that had comforted millions might dissolve. She gripped the envelope tightly. Should she bury it deep inside a drawer? Let it fade with the years? Or should she destroy it? Burn it until only ashes remained? The options raced through her mind, each carrying its own weight. Her chest ached with the pull of two loyalties. Loyalty to the man she once loved, and loyalty to the truth. She sat again, the leather creaking under her as if echoing her unrest. Tears blurred her vision. This wasn't just about her pain. It was about Elvis's legacy, about the man millions adored, the father Lisa Marie cherished, the icon the world believed in. Could one letter undo all of that? The question gnawed at her, refusing to let go. The house seemed to sense her turmoil. The clock chimed again, striking the hour, each note resonating like a warning. She pressed the envelope against her lips, almost as if seeking guidance from the paper itself. And then came another thought, one that chilled her more than the rest. Perhaps she was not the only one who had stumbled upon Elvis's secrets. How many others had known sides of him she never saw? How many more letters were scattered, waiting to be found? She remembered a fan named Maria who once kept a diary. In one entry, she wrote about catching a glimpse of Elvis slipping a folded note into the hand of a young woman at a concert in Las Vegas. November 1972, Maria had written, "He looked like a man desperate to be understood." Even for a moment. Was this that moment captured on paper? Was this letter part of a larger story? Her heart raced faster. If this was just one letter, what else might be hidden in the shadows of his fame? She clenched her fists, realizing the stakes were no longer private. If she destroyed it, she might preserve the myth, but erase a truth that belonged not just to her, but to history. If she revealed it, she might protect honesty, but wound the image of the man she had once defended with her whole soul. The crowd, though absent, felt present. She could hear their voices, fans chanting in stadiums, their cheers echoing through decades. That crowd had loved him blindly. What would they say if they saw this letter? Would their cheers turn to silence? Her hands shook violently now. She pressed her forehead against the desk, whispering, "What am I supposed to do?" The envelope slid slightly from her grasp, landing on the desk with a soft thud. It felt like judgment, and as she stared at it, the weight of her decision grew heavier. Because this was no longer just about a letter. It was about protecting, or exposing, the fragile heart of a legend. And once she chose, there would be no turning back. The letter sat open again, its words burning into her eyes. Priscilla forced herself to read every line, not skimming this time, but absorbing each curve of ink, each pause between sentences. The truth she sought, the truth she feared, was buried in the closing lines. Her breath caught as she reached them. Elvis's hand grew unsteady near the end, as though written in a rush of emotion. The sentences were uneven, raw, almost desperate. And then the twist she had not expected. "I am weak, I stray, but no stage, no crowd, no other love will ever carry me home." "Only you." Priscilla froze. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She read the words again, slower this time. "No other love will ever carry me home." It wasn't neat. It wasn't perfect, but it was something else. It was honest. For so long, she had seen him as larger than life, the king of rock and roll, adored by millions. But these lines stripped away the crown. Here was a man admitting weakness, confessing flaws, and still anchoring himself to her. Her chest tightened. The tears came again, but they were different now. Not only tears of betrayal, but of recognition. She whispered into the quiet room, "You loved me still, even when you failed me." The crowd inside her mind shifted. Where moments ago she had imagined fans turning away, now she saw them leaning closer. Not condemning, but listening. Because in these lines, Elvis was not a myth. He was a man. Short bursts filled her thoughts. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pure. It was human. The truth, struck her like a chord from a gospel song, flawed, yet beautiful in its imperfection. She pictured Elvis backstage, alone after the roar of 20,000 voices had faded. The curtain closed, the spotlight gone. In those moments, perhaps he felt the crushing loneliness fame could never cure. Perhaps this letter was his way of reaching out, of clinging to something real. Priscilla touched the ink, running her finger lightly across the fading lines. It felt like brushing against his heartbeat. She remembered his laughter, his fury, his tenderness. This letter was all of that tangled together. His guilt, his confession, his vow. The question that haunted her shifted. It was no longer who was she, but what do we do with the truths of those we love? Do we punish them for their weakness? Or do we hold the whole of them, their brilliance and their failures, in our hearts? Her tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink slightly. It didn't matter. She would never forget these words. In that moment, she no longer wanted to burn the letter. She wanted to keep it. Not as a weapon, not as revenge, but as proof of the complexity of love. Proof that even Elvis Presley, the king himself, was vulnerable to the same contradictions as anyone else. The letter was not betrayal. It was confession. The air in the study shifted, lighter now, as though the house itself exhaled. The clock ticked softer. The lamp's hum faded to the background. Priscilla folded the page gently, carefully sliding it back into the envelope. She pressed it against her chest one last time, whispering, "I see you, Elvis. I see all of you." The letter no longer felt like a blade. It felt like a mirror. And mirrors, however painful, always show us the truth. But truth carries a cost. Would she share this with the world, or carry it quietly, protecting him from judgment even now? That choice was waiting for her, and it would change everything. The envelope rested on the desk, its edges frayed with age, its secret no longer hidden. Priscilla stared at it, feeling the weight of her decision press against her chest. She could destroy it. One flick of a match, one curl of smoke, and the world would never know. But she didn't. Instead, she placed it carefully inside her purse, as though preserving something fragile. The act surprised even her. She had thought anger might guide her hand, but it was something else entirely. Compassion. Because the letter, in its imperfection, revealed a side of Elvis she knew well. He was a man of extremes. He gave everything to the stage, yet often returned home hollow. He could charm millions, yet struggled to express himself to those closest. And here, in shaky handwriting, was his confession. Flawed, messy, human. Priscilla realized she could either guard that humanity or expose it. The world already had the myth, the rhinestones, the screaming fans, the image of the king untouchable. But myths are cold. This letter carried warmth, even if that warmth was tangled with hurt. She thought of Lisa Marie again. One day, her daughter would grow older and ask harder questions. Perhaps this letter could help answer them, not with perfection, but with honesty. Couldn't that be more powerful than the fairy tale? Her mind returned to the crowd, always present, always watching. In 1976, Las Vegas Hilton had hosted nearly 20,000 fans each night. They believed they were witnessing magic, and they were. But none of them saw the man afterward, sitting in silence, writing words that confessed more than any song. Priscilla knew she could not erase that man, nor should she, so she made her choice. She would protect the letter, keep it safe, hidden from the tabloids that would tear it apart. But years later, when the time was right, she would reveal it, not as scandal, but as testimony. Testimony that love is never perfect, and that even Elvis Presley carried contradictions in his heart. It was not revenge. It was mercy. The decision calmed her like a storm receding. She slipped the envelope into a leather folder, pressing it flat, as though placing a piece of history into a vault. Her eyes drifted to the piano in the corner. She remembered him there, late at night, playing gospel songs until his fingers ached. She remembered his voice cracking, not from lack of talent, but from emotion too big to hold inside. That same emotion bled into the letter, and now She would not erase it, because what do we gain when we destroy the truth? And what do we lose when we refuse to forgive it? She sat back in the chair, closing her eyes. A strange peace filled her chest. The house was still heavy with silence, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt honest. The decision was made. She would carry this letter into the future, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of who he really was. The clock struck once more, echoing through the hallway. Time was moving forward, and so would she. But in the shadows of Graceland, with that letter pressed safely away, Priscilla knew something undeniable. The world might see Elvis as a legend, but she had seen him as a man, and that was the story she would one day tell. Years later, when the letter was finally revealed, the world reacted with the same intensity that once greeted his music. Some fans wept openly, saying they felt betrayed. Others said they loved him more for it, because it proved he was human. The news travelled fast. Headlines appeared. A hidden letter from the king. In Memphis, a reporter for the Press Scimitar wrote that the page offered a window into a soul burdened by fame. Radio stations debated it. Fan clubs split between denial and defense. But over time, the noise softened, and the letter, instead of being remembered as scandal, became something else entirely. It became a relic of truth. Inside Graceland, the envelope was placed under glass in the archive wing, beside concert scarves, ticket stubs, and photographs. Visitors would pause in front of it, reading the words carefully, as though listening for his voice. Some left flowers nearby. Others pressed their hands to the glass. One plaque beneath the display reads simply, "Love, imperfect yet enduring." For scholars, the letter marked a turning point. It showed that Elvis's greatest struggle wasn't only fame or exhaustion, it was love itself. How could a man adored by millions still wrestle with loneliness? How could he sing to crowds of 20,000 and yet feel unseen in his private world? Fans debated those questions for years, gathering in forums, writing books, sharing bootleg recordings where his voice cracked on stage, as if hinting at what he never said aloud. And for Priscilla, the choice she made that night, to keep and later reveal the letter, not only reshaped how people saw Elvis, it reshaped how they saw her. No longer just the woman in the background of a legend, she became the keeper of his truth. The letter travelled further than she ever expected. Museums requested copies. Fan clubs printed excerpts in newsletters. A few lines even appeared on posters, quoted beside photographs of Elvis in his prime. It did not erase the myth. Instead, it deepened it. Because legends endure not by being flawless, but by being real. And in that sense, the letter became part of Elvis's music, a silent verse written in ink instead of melody that carried his voice forward. Even now, the words remain, fragile paper preserved in glass, but alive in the hearts of those who read them, and with each visitor who pauses at the case, the story continues. In the end, the letter did not destroy Priscilla's memory of Elvis. It completed it. Their story was never the polished fairy tale the world wanted it to be. It was full of tenderness and pain, devotion and doubt, and that, perhaps, was its real power. The words Elvis left behind, half confession, half promise, reminded her that love is not measured by perfection. It is measured by endurance. Even when it falters, even when it strays, love can still leave a mark deep enough to last a lifetime. For years, fans clung to the myth of the king and his queen, imagining a love untouched by weakness. But the truth revealed something more relatable, more human. Elvis loved fiercely, but not flawlessly. And isn't that the story of so many lives? Priscilla came to see the letter not as a betrayal, but as a mirror. It showed her the man she knew, not just the star under blinding lights, but the human being behind them. It was his flaws that made his devotion real. The letter's legacy endures because it reminds us of something we all understand, but rarely admit. Love is messy. It bends, it bruises, it fails, and yet it still carries us home. Visitors at Graceland still pause by the glass case. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others smile softly, as if recognizing their own story in his. Because in the king's broken words, they see their own broken truths. Perhaps that is why the story lives on. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And maybe the real question for us is this: can love still be true even when it isn't perfect? Elvis's letter seems to answer yes. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in love's imperfect truth. Were you ever at Graceland, or do you remember the moment Elvis's voice first reached you? Tell us in the comments. We read every one, and if you want more untold legends, stay with us for the next story.